If you're anything like me, when your child gets home from school and you ask, how was school today? You don't get much of an answer. It's fine, it was great. What'd you do? I don't know. Are some of the responses, I would typically get. And related this to soccer, often after a practice session or training, you might ask your child, "Hey, how was practice tonight?" And the answer is something very benign, like good, fine, I don't know, boring, and you really can't get a lot of information from your child about how training went that night, or kind of how things are going. So it's important to kind of sometimes change how we ask questions, what questions we ask, to maybe get more information and be able to really better understand what is going on in practice and how your child is enjoying the experience. Because sometimes we don't get to watch training, we don't get to be at every practice. So that information and communication from the child is important. And you can't ask the coach after every session, how did my child do? You'd like to, and I'm sure if the coach is available, they can answer that as well. But it's also probably more important to hear that directly from your child. So one thing that I've started to ask, my daughter, as she's coming home from school or activities and things like that, is, I would ask, things like, what was your favorite part of practice or school today? And a lot of times when you get a little more specific, they'll talk about something that happened in practice that they really enjoyed. Sometimes we'll follow it up. What's something that the coach or teacher said to you today during practice? What's something that you had a hard time with at practice today? Did you feel like you had a lot of energy at practice today? So there's questions where you can start asking. They get a little more in detail about kind of what the child's experience was like, when they were at practice with their team. Again, it's frustrating for me when I, don't get a lot of information back from my daughter about school or other activities she does when I ask her about it. So I've tried to be much more specific about my questions and, try to leave them open ended to allow her to elaborate and talk about, kind of what she did. So it helps, so you don't have to constantly kind of go to the coach and ask for information. It also helps because sometimes you'll get, "Oh, it was fine, it was great," and then you get kind of halfway through the season and all of a sudden something changes and your child, like, "Oh, hated practice today." And now it's, seems like a completely abrupt turn, and your red flags, alarm bells go off, and, well, what just happened today at practice? And in reality, it could be something that constantly is happening, but we just had no idea about. And then finally, either the child got tired of it, or it's something that's kind of built up in them for quite some time. So it's important to kind of obviously communicate with your child after practice and trainings and games, and ask them questions, like that's going to kind of pull a little more information out. Sometimes you maybe have to wait. Maybe they're not ready to talk about it right after practice or right after a game. You kind of use the 24-hour with your child, just making sure that they're happy, and they seem in a good mood, and then can talk a little more in detail about practice the next day. So sometimes they're not quite ready to discuss if something happened that was really good or really bad in training. They need their own time to process it before they're ready to talk with you. So again, try to ask more specific questions, the different events. Try to pull the information you're looking for. Don't leave it as open-ended as how was practice today. So be a little more specific in your questions, and you'll get a little better idea of how your child's doing, how they're enjoying training, what's going on in training. Help you understand kind of how your child's going through that the youth soccer process with their team.